What if the loneliest moment of your life happened on Christmas morning at a bus stop you never planned to be at? People believe Christmas mornings are warm. They imagine living rooms glowing with soft lights, the smell of coffee in the air, kids laughing, wrapping paper scattered across the floor. They imagine togetherness. But this Christmas morning was cold. Not just cold outside, painfully cold inside. Snow fell quietly at a nearly empty bus stop on the edge of the city, covering the sidewalk in a thin white layer that made everything feel slower, quieter, heavier. A tall man stood there alone. His expensive wool coat was buttoned tight up to his neck, the kind of coat most people only see in magazines. His polished shoes stood out against the slush. Every breath he took turned into a cloud of white fog in the freezing air. His name was Daniel Cross. To the rest of the world, Daniel Cross was untouchable, one of the richest men in the country, a self-made billionaire whose name appeared on skyscrapers, tech headlines, and business magazines. People talked about his success like it was a fairy tale. They said men like him had everything. But standing at that bus stop on Christmas morning, Daniel felt poorer than he ever had in his life. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Again and again. Unread messages stacked on the screen. Assistants checking in. Investors sending holiday wishes. Invitations to private jets, luxury brunches, exclusive parties. Daniel didn't open a single one. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and stared at the snow-covered street ahead, watching cars pass by without slowing down. This was his first Christmas completely alone. No parents, no family, no one waiting for him anywhere. His mother had died years ago. His father followed not long after. And somewhere between board meetings and billion-dollar deals, Daniel had lost a few friendships he once had. Success had filled his calendar, but emptied his life. The city felt distant, uninterested. Daniel shifted his weight, his hands deep in his coat pockets. When he heard it, a small voice, hesitant, soft, "Mister." Daniel turned. A little boy stood a few feet away, maybe 7 years old. He was small for his age, his shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. His jacket was thin, clearly not meant for winter. His sneakers were worn, the sides scuffed and dirty. Around his neck was a red scarf that looked too old for him, frayed at the edges like it had been passed down. Beside the boy sat a tired woman on the bus stop bench. She held a small plastic bag in her lap, gripping it tightly like it contained everything important she owned. The boy looked up at Daniel with wide, honest eyes, the kind of eyes that hadn't learned how to hide disappointment yet. And then he said it. "Mom said Santa forgot us again." The words weren't angry. They weren't dramatic. They were simple, matter of fact. Daniel felt his chest tighten. For a moment, he forgot the cold, forgot the bus, forgot who he was supposed to be. That one sentence hit him harder than any headline ever had. He looked at the boy, then at the woman on the bench. She stared straight ahead, her jaw tight, pretending not to hear what her son had just said. Daniel slowly bent down, so he was closer to the boy's height. "Forgot you?" he asked gently, careful not to sound surprised. The boy nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Last year, too. Mom says Santa gets really busy." The woman shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "He talks too much." Daniel shook his head. "No," he said softly. "He's fine." He looked back at the boy. "What's your name, buddy?" "Eli," the boy replied. "And that's my mom." Daniel offered a small smile. "I'm Daniel." Eli studied him for a moment. Not the coat, not the watch, but his face. "You look sad," Eli said. "Did Santa forget you too?" The question landed like a punch to the chest. Daniel swallowed. He could have laughed it off, could have said something light, but instead he told the truth. "I think he did," Daniel said quietly. Eli nodded, like that answer made perfect sense. "My dad used to wait for Santa," Eli said casually, "but he doesn't live with us anymore." The woman turned her head away, blinking quickly. Daniel felt something tighten deep in his chest. He had built billion-dollar companies, negotiated deals that changed industries, stood in rooms where everyone listened when he spoke, But he had no idea how to respond to a child's quiet honesty. Snow continued to fall around them. And standing at that bus stop, Daniel began to realize something he had forgotten long ago. Christmas doesn't reveal who has the most. It reveals who has the least, and who still knows how to hope. Daniel knelt slightly so he was eye level with the boy, ignoring the cold seeping through his coat. "Forgot you?" he asked gently, like he was afraid the words might hurt if he said them too loudly. The boy nodded, not angry, not dramatic, just calm, accepting. "Yeah," he said. "He forgot us last year, too. Mom says Santa gets busy." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Busy. The woman beside the boy shifted uncomfortably on the bench. She clearly hadn't meant for her son to say that out loud. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice tired more than embarrassed. "Kids talk. He doesn't mean anything by it." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said softly. "He's not wrong." The woman looked up at him, surprised. Daniel turned his attention back to the boy. "What's your name, buddy?" "Eli," the boy replied. "And that's my mom." Daniel offered a small, polite smile to the woman. "I'm Daniel." Eli studied him carefully. Not the coat, not the shoes, his face. "You look sad, too," Eli said suddenly. "Did Santa forget you?" The question landed harder than any boardroom loss Daniel had ever faced. For a moment he couldn't speak. No investor meeting had ever made his throat tighten like this. No failed deal had ever left him this exposed. Daniel swallowed. "I think he did," he said honestly. Eli nodded like that answer made perfect sense. "Oh," he said, "that happens sometimes." Daniel almost laughed, but nothing came out. Eli leaned back against the bench, his legs swinging slightly. "My dad used to wait for Santa too," he added casually. "But he doesn't live with us anymore." The words were simple. Too simple. The boy's mother turned her face away, pretending to watch the street. But Daniel noticed her jaw tighten and her hand clench around the plastic bag in her lap. Daniel felt something tighten deep in his chest. He had built billion-dollar companies, changed industries, signed contracts that made headlines. But he had no idea how to respond to a child's quiet truth. After a moment, Daniel asked, "So, what are you guys doing out here so early on Christmas?" The woman hesitated, then answered. "We're waiting for the bus," she said. "My sister lives across town. She said we could stay with her for a bit." Eli perked up. "She makes pancakes," he said proudly. "Not every day, but sometimes. Today might be one of those days." Daniel smiled before he could stop himself. "That sounds pretty great." Eli shrugged. "They're not fancy pancakes," he said, "but they're good." Daniel nodded. Sometimes the simple ones are the best. Snow continued falling around them, soft and quiet. Cars passed by, but no one slowed down. Eli glanced at Daniel's shoes again, clean, polished, expensive. "Are you rich?" he asked bluntly. The woman gasped. "Eli, that's rude." Daniel chuckled softly. "It's okay," he said. "I get that a lot." He thought for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "I guess I am." Eli squinted, processing that information. "Then maybe Santa didn't forget you," he said finally. "Maybe he thought you already had enough." The words hit Daniel harder than anything else that morning. Enough. Daniel looked away, his eyes burning. Eli reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small. A candy cane. It was broken in half. He held it out toward Daniel. "You can have this," Eli said. "I was saving it, but you look like you need it more." Daniel stared at the candy cane. No one had ever offered him something they needed, not once in his adult life. He took it carefully, like it might disappear if he moved too fast. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely steady. Eli smiled, satisfied. "You're welcome." The woman watched the exchange silently, her eyes glassy. The bus stop speaker crackled. Route 17 arriving in 5 minutes. The woman stood, adjusting the bag on her shoulder. "Come on, Eli," she said gently. Eli hopped up, then paused. "Merry Christmas, mister," he said. "I hope Santa finds you." Daniel stood there as they stepped toward the curb, something heavy settling in his chest. He watched the boy take his mother's hand. And for the first time in years, Daniel Cross, the billionaire with everything, felt like he had just been given something priceless. Not money, not power, perspective. And standing there in the falling snow, Daniel realized something that would stay with him long after Christmas morning was over. Sometimes Santa doesn't forget. Sometimes he just shows up, wearing worn sneakers, a red scarf, and the courage to tell the truth. Snow continued to fall, light but steady, as the bus stop speaker crackled to life above them. "Attention, passengers. Route 17 is delayed." The words echoed faintly down the quiet street, then faded back into silence. Daniel exhaled slowly and, without really thinking about it, sat down on the cold metal bench beside them. The chill seeped through his coat immediately, but he didn't move. For once, the discomfort felt appropriate. For a moment, none of them spoke. Snow gathered on the edge of the bench, on Eli's scarf, on Daniel's shoulders. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "So," he said gently, glancing between the boy and his mother, "what are you two doing out here on Christmas morning?" The woman hesitated. Daniel noticed it right away. The way her shoulders stiffened, the way her fingers tightened around the small plastic bag in her lap. It was a hesitation of someone who had answered this question too many times. She cleared her throat. "The shelter is full," she said quietly. "Every bed, every floor space. They've been full since last night." Daniel nodded, listening. "We're heading to my sister's place across town," she continued. "She said we could stay for a bit, just until things settle." Her voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Eli kicked his feet gently, his heels tapping against the bench in a soft rhythm. "She makes pancakes," he said proudly, like this detail mattered more than anything else. "Not every day, only sometimes. But today might be one of those days." Daniel smiled, and this time it came naturally. "That sounds pretty good," he said. Eli beamed. "They're not fancy pancakes," he added quickly. "No blueberries or stuff like that. But they're warm." Daniel nodded. "Warm pancakes on Christmas sounds perfect to me." The mother glanced at him, surprised by how easily he fit into the conversation. She expected polite distance. Instead, she found understanding. Snow continued to drift down around them. Eli's eyes wandered, curious, until they landed on Daniel's shoes. Clean, polished, expensive. The kind that never touched slush unless someone had a driver waiting nearby. He stared at them for a moment. Then he asked, completely serious, "You rich?" The mother gasped, mortified. "Eli," she said sharply. "That's rude." Daniel laughed quietly, a soft sound that surprised even him. "It's okay," he said. "Kids are honest." He paused, thinking. "I guess so," he added. "Yeah, I'm rich." Eli tilted his head, processing that information. You could almost see the gears turning in his mind. "Huh," he said. He thought for a few more seconds, then nodded like he'd reached a conclusion. "Then maybe Santa didn't forget you," Eli said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Why is that?" Eli shrugged. "Maybe Santa thought you already had enough," he said simply. The words landed heavier than they should have. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He turned his face slightly toward the street, pretending to watch the empty road, but really trying to blink away the sudden burn in his eyes. Enough. He had money, power, recognition. But standing there, listening to a 7-year-old explain Christmas in a way no adult ever had, he realized how empty enough could feel. Eli reached into the pocket of his thin jacket and pulled something out carefully, like it was fragile. A candy cane. It was broken cleanly in half. He looked at it for a second, then held it out toward Daniel. "You can have this," Eli said. "I was saving it, but you look like you need it." Daniel stared at the candy cane. It wasn't wrapped perfectly. It wasn't new. It wasn't whole, but it was offered freely. No one had ever given him something they needed. Not investors. Not partners. Not people who wanted favors. This was different. He reached out and took it slowly, like he was afraid the moment might disappear if he moved too fast. "Thank you," Daniel whispered. Eli smiled, satisfied, like he'd done exactly what he was supposed to do. "You're welcome." The mother watched the exchange in silence, her eyes glassy. She pressed her lips together, fighting emotion. The bus stop speaker crackled again. Route 17 arriving in 3 minutes. She stood, lifting the plastic bag onto her shoulder. "Come on, Eli," she said gently. "The bus will be here soon." Eli hopped off the bench, then turned back toward Daniel. "Merry Christmas, mister," he said. "I hope Santa finds you." Daniel stood there as they stepped closer to the curb, the broken candy cane still warm in his hand. He watched Eli take his mother's hand, their fingers fitting together naturally. And in that quiet moment, something shifted inside him. For the first time in years, Daniel Cross, the billionaire with everything, felt like he had just received a real gift. Not money, not status, not success, but perspective. And as the snow continued to fall, Daniel realized something that would stay with him long after Christmas morning was over. Sometimes Santa doesn't come down chimneys. Sometimes he shows up at a bus stop, wearing worn sneakers, a red scarf, and the courage to give away the last thing he has. The bus headlights appeared in the distance, cutting to the falling snow like two bright eyes in the dark. The low hum of the engine grew louder as it approached, tires crunching against the icy road. The mother stood and began gathering their things, slipping the small plastic bag over her shoulder and tugging Eli's scarf up a little higher around his neck. "Thank you for talking with him," she said to Daniel, offering a tired but genuine smile. "Merry Christmas." Eli gave a cheerful wave, his mittened hand moving side to side. "Merry Christmas, mister," he said. "I hope Santa finds you." Daniel opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. As they stepped toward the bus door, something unexpected surged through him. Panic. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you realize you're about to lose something important, and you don't know why it matters so much yet. "Wait," Daniel said suddenly. The word came out sharper than he intended. They both turned. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone on instinct. His thumb hovered over the screen, ready to call an assistant, book a ride, make a transfer. Then he stopped. This wasn't about money or solutions he could outsource. He slid the phone back into his pocket. "Would you?" he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "Would you come have breakfast with me?" The mother blinked, surprised. "I know a place," Daniel added quickly, almost nervously. "It's warm. Close by. No pressure. Just breakfast." The mother hesitated. You could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the habit of weighing risk, of protecting her son, of never expecting kindness without a catch. She looked down at Eli. Eli's face lit up instantly. "Do they have pancakes?" he asked. Daniel smiled, this time fully. "They have the best pancakes," he said. "I promise." The mother studied Daniel for another moment, then nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Just breakfast." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. An hour later, they sat in a small, quiet diner a few blocks away. The windows were fogged from the warmth inside, and soft Christmas music played low in the background. The place smelled like coffee, butter, and something sweet baking in the back. Steam rose from their plates as food was set down in front of them. Eli stared at a stack of pancakes like it was the greatest thing he'd ever seen. "Whoa," he whispered. Within seconds, he had syrup on his nose and a grin on his face, laughing every time it dripped down his fork. The mother, her name was Rachel, Daniel learned, sat back in her booth, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Her shoulders slowly relaxed, as if she were finally letting herself breathe. "I can't remember the last time we sat somewhere warm like this," she admitted softly. Without rushing, Daniel nodded. "I don't come to places like this often," he said. "But maybe I should." Rachel smiled faintly. They talk about simple things. Where Eli went to school. How Rachel used to love baking before life got complicated. How Daniel once burned toast so badly he set off a fire alarm in his penthouse. Eli laughed the loudest at that. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt something unfamiliar settle over him. Peace. Not excitement. Not victory. Just peace. When breakfast was over, Daniel stood and walked toward the counter. He paid quietly, then slipped something else onto the table before Rachel could notice. As they gathered their things, Rachel reached for a bag and saw it, an envelope resting near her plate. She frowned and opened it. Her breath caught. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking. "This is too much." "For rent," he said gently. "School, groceries, whatever you need. No cameras, no press, no strings." Tears filled her eyes. "You don't even know us," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I know enough," he said simply. Rachel pressed the envelope to her chest, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea what this means." Daniel looked at Eli, who was still licking syrup off his fingers. "I think I do," he said. They walked outside together. The snow had slowed now, falling softly, almost peacefully. Eli tugged on Daniel's coat sleeve. "Hey, mister?" "Yes." Eli grinned. "I think Santa found you after all." Daniel smiled, watching them walk away down the street. And standing there in the cold, with a taste of coffee still warm in his mouth and a broken candy cane in his pocket, Daniel Cross realized something he would never forget. Sometimes the greatest gift you receive on Christmas isn't something you keep. It's something that finally reminds you you're not alone. Weeks later, Daniel Cross sat alone in his office, long after the rest of the building had gone quiet. The holidays were officially over. The Christmas lights across the city had been taken down. Life had returned to schedules, deadlines, and routines. But Daniel hadn't. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, reflecting off steel and concrete outside. His desk was spotless. No clutter, no distractions. Just one small envelope resting near his laptop. It wasn't expensive. No logo. No stamp that suggested importance. Just his name written in uneven handwriting. Daniel picked it up slowly. Somehow, he already knew who it was from. Inside was a folded piece of paper. The edges were worn, like it had been opened and closed more than once. Daniel unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures standing at a bus stop. Snow falling gently around them. One tall figure in a long coat. A small boy wearing a scarf. A woman holding a bag. All 3 were smiling. Below the drawing were words written carefully, each letter shaped with effort. "Mom says Santa didn't forget us this year. She says sometimes Santa looks like people." Daniel leaned back in his chair, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. His eyes burned. He stared at the words for a long moment, letting them sink in. He hadn't cried in years. Not when his parents passed. Not when deals collapsed. Not when he sat alone in rooms worth more money than most people would see in a lifetime. But now, quietly, tears filled his eyes. That Christmas hadn't given him a family, but had given him something he didn't even realize he had been missing for years. Meaning, he thought back to that cold morning, the bus stop, the thin jacket, the red scarf, the broken candy cane. How easily he could have stayed standing. How easily he could have walked away. How close he came to missing it all. In the weeks that followed Christmas, Daniel noticed changes in himself. He stopped rushing through people. He learned the names of the staff in his building. He listened when someone spoke instead of checking his phone. He funded shelters and school programs quietly. No press releases, no announcements. Not because he felt guilty, but because he felt connected. Some nights, when the city lights flickered below his penthouse and the silence fell heavy, Daniel would pull the drawing from his desk drawer and study it again. Not because it reminded him of money he gave, but because it reminded him of something money could never buy. Human connection. Across the city, in a small apartment filled with the smell of laundry, soap, and warm food, Eli taped a copy of that same drawing above his bed. Every night before sleeping, he would point to the tall stick figure. "That's him," Eli would say proudly. "That's the man from the bus stop." Rachel would smile, sitting beside him, brushing his hair back gently. "Yes," she'd say, "that's him." Eli would nod seriously. "I think Santa's real," he'd say. "He just doesn't wear red all the time." Rachel would laugh softly. "Maybe you're right. Life wasn't suddenly perfect. Bills still came. Days were still hard. Some mornings were still heavy. But something had changed. Not because of the breakfast, not because of the envelope, but because someone had seen them, because a stranger had stopped. And somewhere else in the city, a man who had everything learned a lesson from a child who had almost nothing. That the greatest gift isn't what you receive. It's what you choose to notice. And even when Santa seems to forget, kindness never does. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soulvex Studio. Here, we share stories that remind us that kindness still exists and humanity still matters. Thank you for watching.